Days after Kurt Cobain's death in 1994, more than 20 of his personal journals were recovered.
These are not diaries the way a teenage girl had diaries. They were his private thoughts, lyrics, ideas for things, to-do lists, budgets.
These recently published excerpts provide an exclusive window into the mind of a rock legend.
These are notebooks that were left on his coffee table, and he at times encouraged people to read them.
They show a man reaching for pop stardom only to become dismayed once he found it.
The one thing that represented freedom became just another grind.
They show another side of Kurt, the talented artist.
I was blown away that the human mind could come up with some of this stuff.
Gangster rap fan.
I remember sitting in that van and they were playing that NWA record over and over and over again.
And man of faith.
He prayed every night. He taught our daughter how to pray.
This Kurt Cobain was anything but a slacker.
He wanted to be a rock star early on.
As new fans discover Kurt through songs like You Know You're Right, his artistry lives on.
The fact that he died of his own hand, it's not going to be the ultimate story of what his music meant to the history of music.
Others have spoken. Now it's time to let Kurt tell his own story. As he wrote, "When you wake up this morning, please read my diary. Look through my things and figure me out." Next up, The Rise and Rise Of presents The Secret Life of Kurt Cobain. The grunge icon who loved feedback and volcanic drumming grew up listening to pop radio in the rural Washington town of Aberdeen.
The local radio station only played top 40 music, so, I mean, we were pretty much just stuck.
He grew up on Cheap Trick and REO Speedwagon, the Buggles. Stuff that he might have later been embarrassed to admit he was into. He does mention in the journals that Seasons in the Sun made him cry.
Goodbye, Papa, it's hard to die.
Music was salvation for Kurt, whose childhood turned sour after his parents divorced when he was 9. He was shuttled between 10 different relatives and family friends.
A lot of his anger probably does come from his anger at his parents.
After he was famous, he'd tell interviewers he was so unloved that he lived under Aberdeen's Young Street Bridge. But friends say it wasn't true.
We'd hear stories like Kurt lived under a bridge, and I would go, no, he didn't.
Kurt was consumed with a generational anger. He wrote, "I like to blame my parents' generation for coming so close to social change and then giving up. The baby boomers became the ultimate conforming yuppie hypocrites."
Come on, people now! Smile on your brother! Everybody get together! Try to love one another right now!
He lays a lot of the blame for his parents' divorce on hippie values and the way the baby boomers just kind of were very lax. And their experimentation kind of neglected something as important as raising their kids well.
The angry child sought an outlet in music, writing list after list of favorite bands, dreaming of new guitars and ultimately playing music himself.
I never met someone with so much passion and drive in my life.
When Kurt first got a guitar, he would take it to school every day. One of his friends reported that he saw Kurt with the guitar at the bus stop, and he went up, and Kurt's first words out of his mouth was, "It's broken, so don't ask me to play it." So he had a broken guitar, and he was still carrying it around. That became his mask, his persona, his reason for people to care about him.
I never doubted him once. I told my dad that, watch this guy, he's going to be somebody.
Outside of music, Kurt's life had its share of small-town dangers.
I wanted to be Evel Knievel first. Well, I remember one time I took a piece of metal and taped it to my chest. I taped a bunch of firecrackers on that piece of metal and put my shirt over it and lit myself on fire and jumped off the roof, But then I hurt myself too much.
We were driving around the countryside throwing .46 of dynamite. One of them came back in and landed in the back seat. And fortunately, the fuse didn't work. Otherwise, the car would have been blown up.
He had the notion to join the Navy, so after a week of talking to the recruiter, Kurt decides to back out. So I ended up joining the Navy, and he just wouldn't go.
In the mid-1980s, Buzz Osborne, leader of a band called the Melvins, turned Kurt onto punk rock.
I had Buzz in a couple of classes. He had a few punk rock magazines, and I would look at them just like, I was just mesmerized.
I took him to his very first punk rock concert, which was Black Flag,
It was great, and I remember him being very overwhelmed by the whole entire experience. Once that kind of thing happens, there's just no looking back.
Kurt was transformed. He wrote, "I like punk rock more than anything in the whole wide world."
It was the outsider music. It was the rebellious music.
After hooking up with local bassist Chris Novoselic, they began playing regular gigs as Nirvana, which he wrote means freedom from pain and suffering in the external world. Early gigs brought in just $30 a show, so Kurt planned other ways to raise rent money.
He thought if he formed a janitorial service and came up with good little ads for it called Pine Tree Janitorial, he would make more money and have a career as a janitor.
The ad is a rare peek at Kurt, the entrepreneur. He wrote, "We purposely limit our number of commercial offices in order to personally clean while taking our time."
I call them Lucy and Ethel schemes. The fact that at that point Kurt was thinking his big break was if he could get a good job cleaning bathrooms shows you the economic circumstance that he was in.
At the same time, Kurt started sending demo tapes to record labels begging for a contract. He kept his hopes of becoming a rock star mostly to himself because such ambition was unseemly among the punk rock set.
Kurt did not feel entirely secure with how far he would go for success.
He wanted to play for 500,000 people rather than 10 people, and at the same time felt totally guilty for wanting that. This continuous to and fro that made him the unique artist that he is also may have driven him insane.
In 1989, the local Seattle label Sub Pop released Nirvana's first album, Bleach. But Kurt had bigger things in mind, as he half-jokingly wrote in a mock band bio. Nirvana sees the underground scene as becoming stagnant and more accessible toward commercialized major label interests. Does Nirvana feel a moral duty to change this cancerous evil? No way. We want to cash in and suck up to the bigwigs. It would prove to be the defining contradiction of his life. With new drummer Dave Grohl on board, Nirvana signed with a major label, Geffen Records. But even as Kurt was signing the deal, he wrote to a friend, "I got evicted from my apartment. I'm living in my car, so I've no address, but here's Chris's phone number for messages."
We think of Kurt as quite successful, but even in the year of 1991, when Nevermind came out, he was, homeless.
Nirvana set off for a European tour, opening for one of Kurt's favorite groups, Sonic Youth.
To be asked to go on tour by a band like Sonic Youth was like a dream come true.
In Holland, they had on these white lab coats, and they were knocking over the equipment at the end, and Kurt was really wasted that night. I remember there's one point where he's trying actually to knock over the PA stand. The stage hands were like completely flipping out and going ballistic.
Kurt wrote, "God, how I do love playing live. It's the most primal form of energy release you can share with other people, besides having sex or taking drugs."
The crowd was going crazy, and I just remember it as being one of the most amazing rock shows in my life.
We're going to play with Nirvana. The lineup was supposed to be us headlining and Nirvana opening up for us. We kept hearing Smells Like Teen Spirit everywhere. I mean, their record was just going nuts, you know. Of course, they were headlining and we were opening up for them.
As Nevermind shot up the charts, Kurt became a symbol for a generation of frustrated and alienated youth.
That scream. The first time I heard that, I felt like, my life was being changed.
That howl was the perfect expression of a certain kind of pain that these kids were feeling.
Offstage, friends remember Kurt as a prankster.
He had an amazing sense of humor. I think it's a quality that gets obscured with the whole image of being the dour, angry rock poet.
Kurt was fine when he showed up at the Nirvana Unplugged, and the one note he gave us was, if you get any shots of me smiling, make sure you use them, because people say I don't smile enough. And at the end of the first song, it's genius, because he just gives us this smile that was just so perfect, Kurt.
He asked me if I write something on your forehead, I'll let you write something on mine. So he writes 666 on my forehead, then takes the pen and runs away.